Welcome to another broadcast of the Debra Rufini Show on the ArtistFirst radio network. All past shows are archived. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. And now, from England, here she is, your host, Debra Rufini.
Greetings from England. Welcome to another broadcast of the Debra Rufini Show. Today it is my absolute pleasure to be speaking with Dr Jane Gregory, clinical psychologist, on the subject of misophonia. What is misophonia, you may well ask? Well, it's something that Jane and I both have in common. Misophonia is selective sound sensitivity syndrome, where people react to certain sounds referred to as triggers. This can be anything from sniffing, clicking, particular eating noises, almost an allergy to sound, if you like. Jane, welcome to the show. Thank you for being with us. Good to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay, thanks. And you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. I don't know where it's nice to be of course it's nice to be speaking to anyone from anywhere, but it's a fellow Brit. I'm speaking to a fellow Brit now. Usually I'm speaking to someone from America.
I'm technically not a Brit. I've been here for 10 years, but I'm actually Australian.
Oh, are you? Yep. Oh, why didn't I pick up on the accent? I'm rubbish at this.
I think it's just softened over time since I've been here.
Oh, right. How long have you been here?
Nearly 10 years.
Oh, okay. Oh, so not terribly a long time, but it's significant enough time not enough time to totally lose an accent.
It's fairly established here, certainly.
Oh, it's good here, isn't it? The weather's a bit funny at the moment, but... So, Jane, this is something we both suffer from, and I'm not sure if it's a word I think not that many people are familiar with, but I think, I'm just guessing, I think there's probably more people out there with it than maybe we can assume. When were you first aware that certain noises kind of triggered you or irritated you, for want of a better word? I don't know how we'd put that.
The earliest I remember it actually really impacting me was probably around the age of 8 or 9. I remember it actually started with some pigeons that used to sit outside my bedroom window and make that cooing kind of noise that they make, and I just remember not being able to concentrate, not being able to go back to sleep if they woke me up in the morning, and getting really, really agitated by this noise, and nobody in my family understanding why on earth I was getting so upset by birds outside my window.
Oh, right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it's hard to because I think most of us get annoyed, but for goodness sake, stop that drilling in the road, or stop, but it's, people don't understand that it can be so distressing.
Yeah, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I could understand why people don't get it, and I didn't get it myself for a really, really long time, but I also thought that I was just really uptight or a bit crazy, and
did you?
Didn't understand myself why I was getting so upset by these noises.
Yeah, I wonder, do we know anything about if it is just something that there doesn't have to be an underlying reason for certain noises that trigger certain people, or whether there is do we know anything about that?
Mm-hmm. There's a theory that I quite like, that I find quite reassuring anyway, the idea that it makes sense that a certain percentage of the population would have this particular sensitivity, because it's the sort of noises that you would need to listen out for. Say you're out foraging in the woods or something, that someone needs to be listening out for sounds of a predator coming up alongside you or behind you, and so thinking about that repetitive kind of rustling noises, breathing noises, smacking lips, that if an animal was around the corner eating something, you'd want to be able to filter in that noise to work out whether it was a threat or not. And even just, in more modern day, just the idea of like footsteps behind you, that if you're walking at night and you might be talking with someone, but you can still kind of pick up on the sound of footsteps and notice that there's this repetitive sound behind you, that you could be in danger and that it's worth paying attention to. So I think it makes sense that some of us have that ability. I talk about this a bit with my patients as well, about like the idea of a tribe of meerkats, that if you've got those meerkats that sort of sit on top of the hill, that would be us, that would be our job, would be the ones to be looking out for danger and noticing if there were any subtle sounds that sounded a bit suspicious, that would be our role to protect the tribe so that others were free to focus on whatever their job was.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, and it's different sounds that are triggers for different people, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems to be. There are a few that are pretty common. So eating and breathing, mouth and throat noises seem to be the most common ones that get reported, but lots of people will talk about just any kind of repetitive tapping sort of noise or rustling sort of noise, and it seems to be the repetition of it that is the problem. And when it comes to the really explosive emotional reaction that comes from it, then it's also about who's doing it, whether they have any control over it, and whether they should be doing it. So there's an added layer of emotion when it feels like someone shouldn't be behaving like that. They shouldn't be making that noise in public, or they should be eating with better manners or something like that. That there seems to be a stronger emotional reaction when there's a should element to it about how people should be behaving.
That makes sense, actually, because, do you know, that's interesting you say that, because I get more irritable. My thing, Jane, is it's sniffers and rustlers. So
yeah, I can relate to that.
But it's sniffers. If some I like what you said there, because if someone had a cold and they couldn't, even so, I'd want to offer them a tissue for them to blow their nose. But it's when people. Oh, sorry, we mustn't trigger ourselves here. But like with every inhaling. Every breath they take in, they sniff rather than just breathe. And you think, they don't need to do that.
Yeah.
That's just
lazy.
lazy.
One of the things that sort of shifted things a little bit for me was because sniffing used to be a huge trigger for me. And then I moved into a flat that had a lot of damp in it, and I developed this postnasal drip that made me cough quite a lot and sniff quite a lot. And all the blowing my nose, all the knowing the world I could do didn't actually change that sniffing and coughing, because I just couldn't get rid of whatever it was. And so then I started to think, maybe these people that I've been so harshly judging all this time, maybe they just had some kind of allergy or rhinitis or something like that that's actually causing this problem that they can't fix. And so then I started to have a little bit more sympathy for other people, because I realized that I was now doing the thing that I'd been so annoyed by in the past.
Yeah.
And so that was when I started to think about it more from a psychological perspective, thinking like, what is that it can't just be the noise if the reaction that I get can shift just based on how I feel about what's going on. And another example of that was one night I was lying in bed and my husband was breathing really loudly next to me, and I was like, oh God, it's so annoying, like, why can't he just breathe quieter? And then I realized it was actually my 2-year-old son.
Oh.
And suddenly I felt fine. I was like, he's allowed to breathe as loud as he wants, he can't help it. So again, it wasn't the noise itself that was causing the reaction, it was the noise was sort of what drew my attention and started the reaction, but what built up the reaction was what I thought was going on, and that emotional reaction dropped as soon as I made sense of it in a more compassionate way.
Oh, yeah. No, that does make sense, I think. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm going back to sort of, if I see someone eating a bag of crisps. Now, the funny thing is, eating noises don't bother me, and that's strange, because a lot of the time with people with misophonia, it's eating noises. But if I'm near someone eating a bag of crisps, and they're rustling a bit of the way, and then they finish their crisps and they throw the packet away, I'm fine with that. But it's like the half an hour afterwards where they're playing with the packet. Just throw it away. You don't need to do that.
Especially there where you don't know how long that's going to last for. If you can see a packet of crisps, you know how long it's going to last for because it's a certain size and people can only eat so slowly. But if someone's playing with an empty packet, there's no time limit on that.
No.
I think that then it just builds because of the frustration of not knowing when this is going to end.
I think, that's right, isn't it? That is the kind of... And then... I don't know if it happens with you, but with me, like, it can bring on a panic attack. I think it's because the unpredictability, or what if this carries on and I suddenly just sort of shout, or it's not going to happen. It's not rational that you're just going to do something mad. But for me, that can link if I don't know how long it's going to go on for.
Yeah,
it can
sort of. This feeling like this could just keep building up until I do something that I regret, or consequences.
Do you feel that as well? Have you felt like that?
Not so much anymore. I used to get that feeling, and especially because when I was a kid, I did have a couple of examples of snapping, being quite aggressive. So I remember I was on holiday with my family, and we're in quite close quarters with each other, and my brother was eating his donut, and I was telling him, just eat quietly, and he wouldn't or couldn't eat any quieter than he was eating. And eventually I just snapped and I grabbed it out of his hand and threw it in the bin.
Yeah.
And I couldn't take it. And so it's like that memory was sort of implanted in my mind to say, that's what you're capable of. You can just snatch food off people. And if you can do that, what else might you be capable of? And so for a long time I was really careful to try and contain or leave the situation because I was so worried about what I might do.
Yeah, and that can be concerning, can't it? If it's sort of... if it's not part of your character, that it can just bring this out in you.
I think so. Especially that conflict of where this isn't me. Like, I'm not this aggressive person, and I'm not this uptight person, and yet I'm seeming and sounding and feeling quite aggressive and uptight right now, and that conflict is pretty hard to process, I think.
Mm. Yes, that's quite true. Yeah. The other day I found myself, I'm sure there's a car that parks up this road outside my house that's got 70 doors.
There's one with all the doors taking forever to slam.
Yeah. And I think it's sort of like the passenger, the driver gets out, one slam, the passenger gets out, another slam, and then there's maybe someone in the back, another slam, gets something out of the boot, another slam. Then the passenger goes back in and I found myself going out the front, making out I'm just checking my recycle bins so that I can give a bit of a glare. And I think, and that's my aggression coming. I think, well, they just need to get something out of their boot. They just need to go. They're not hearing that probably, but it's the other person that's left hearing that and getting irritated.
Yeah, and that's the thing that for the people who are making the noise, because they don't have the same sensitivity to those particular noises, they have no idea that it's affecting people. So when you bring it up with people, they're often just baffled because it doesn't actually make any sense because they don't hear the noises the same way, or they just say, well, just ignore it because that's what they could do. Not really understanding that is literally the problem, is that we can't ignore it, that once we hear these noises, for some reason we can't filter them out, and that then becomes part of our focus until the noise goes away.
Yes, yeah, that's true. You have great insight.
What you described there about like poking your head out and giving a glare or something, that seems to be a pretty typical reaction. One being to try and find the source of the noise. It's almost like you get a little bit of sense of control or predictability if you know where the noise is coming from, and people feel more on edge when they can't work out where the noise is coming from.
Yes.
But also the glare, where it sort of feels like they need to let them know that they're doing something wrong. Assuming that people must know deep down they're doing something wrong, and they just need to be reminded this is one of the times that they're doing something wrong. But actually most people are just confused by the glare because it doesn't make any sense, because most of the time they're behaving perfectly reasonably. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true actually, isn't it? If they haven't got an idea, it's they're just left baffled. It can control your life, can't it? I mean, or certainly dictate to it. And, in many instances can make people avoid people or situations.
Yeah.
I guess it can, which is sad, because when it takes a control like that.
Yeah, I've heard stories of people having really, really restricted lives, and I certainly have planned my life a little bit around it. So when I am moving into a new place, I'll check out the noise situation before I move in, and I'm pretty conscious of noise coming from above or through walls. I love going to the cinema, but I'll usually only go during the day once a movie's already been out for several weeks, so that
nice.
It's likely to be fairly empty and I can move around away from the sound of popcorn being eaten.
Yeah.
And escape the noise if I have to, whereas if you go on a opening weekend packed cinema, you just can't escape the noises. So I tend to plan things around just my life feeling a bit calmer in that way.
That's very wise. Because there's ways around it, aren't there? Sometimes there's ways of avoiding what could be.
Some noises are unavoidable, but there are lots that you can plan around if you need to.
Yeah, that's right. Or wait for the film to come out on DVD, even better.
I just love going to the cinema, though. Like, I love the immersive experience. I love sitting in a dark room. I love that no one can see me cry in the dark. So I just love having a good cry when I'm watching films.
Oh,
so actually, to lose going to the cinema would be a really big deal for me. So I've just had to make it work in a way that I can still be immersed. As soon as I can hear something, I stop focusing on the film and get distracted by it. So I just have to manage it so that I can still have what I want, but just in a slightly modified way.
That's good, because you're not letting it control you.
Yeah, I certainly didn't want to stop me from living my life. And in the same way, I usually carry earplugs with me so that especially if I'm in a situation where I need to focus, I've managed to sort of work on my own emotional reactions where I don't get this strong emotional reaction anymore. I don't get a feeling of rage. I don't feel really anxious. I don't feel as disgusted as I used to feel.
Oh, good.
But once I've noticed the noise, I find it really, really hard to filter it out. And so when I do need to focus, I need some way of blocking that noise. If I don't have to focus, I can deal with it now. I've managed things to get to that point where I can handle it. But if I do need to concentrate, then I will put earplugs in or block out the noise in some way.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah, I think a lot of it can be enhanced by the fear of not being able to get away from it. I think that can make it worse, can't it? If you feel you can't get away from it. It's,
well, certainly feeling trapped by something that is putting you on edge never made anyone feel too good.
No, definitely not. What about the medical profession? Are they beginning to take it seriously, do you think?
I think it's a slow journey. I'm a clinical psychologist and I didn't even hear about it. I'm a psychologist and I had it and I still didn't hear about it or find out the word for it until just a few years ago.
Wow.
So the fact that I didn't even know about it until a few years ago shows where it's at the moment. People are starting to hear about it, but it's mostly coming from the people themselves who have it, educating their health professionals. That most people find out about it by typing into the internet. Why do I want to throw things at the person who's eating opposite me? And then they find the term misophonia and they find the description of sensitivity to specific sounds that causes an escalation in emotions, and they read that and they go, oh my God, that's me, that's what I've experienced my whole life, and why did no one tell me that this thing existed? And the reality was it's only been in the last 20 years that it's even been acknowledged as a collection of symptoms and given the name of misophonia. It's also given the name of selective sound sensitivity syndrome. And it's only been talked about more publicly in the media in the last sort of 5 or 10 years, so it's going to take a while for the health professions to catch up, I think. And it does just sound ridiculous. So I think unless you've experienced yourself or seen the first-hand suffering that it causes somebody, it just sounds like someone being really uptight and intolerant.
Yeah. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It makes it sound like we're just being sort of hissy fit, and it's not taken. I first became aware of it in Googling. I think I Googled something like sound irritation disorder or something, or it was something like that, and then I realised it was a real thing. But so you're raising awareness of this, aren't you, Jane, in your line of work? Is that right?
I'm trying to. Yeah, it actually
Brilliant.
started about just over a year ago. I was just looking at it. I was literally just researching it to write a blog post about it. I thought, this could be an interesting way to talk about cognitive behavior therapy, which is the type of therapy that I do. And I thought, I wonder if I could talk about it in the context of misophonia. I wonder if anyone's doing that. And then I looked into it a little bit, and I saw there were a couple of studies talking about using CBT for it. And so I started to write this blog post, and I was thinking, why aren't more people doing this? And then I started testing out some ideas on myself to write about in the blog, and started to feel a lot better. And then started thinking, well, actually, if no one else was doing it, I could be the one to do it.
Right.
And I was perfectly placed. I work in a specialist anxiety disorder service in London, and so at the time I just started talking about it a little bit more in the team, and then by sheer coincidence we got a referral for somebody who had it, and the health professional hadn't known how to help them. So there was a lot of anxiety and panic involved, so they sent them to us to treat the anxiety part of it. And so it gave me a chance to see this patient and talk with them about the ideas that I'd formulated based on my experiences, and then adjust them for the patient's experiences. And then together we started to come up with some ideas about how we might treat it, and borrowing lots of ideas from the treatment that we use for obsessive-compulsive disorder and body dysmorphic disorder, and a little bit from post-traumatic stress disorder. So just kind of taken the key pieces from all of those that we think look or sound a bit similar to what happens in misophonia, and started coming up with a treatment protocol for it. There were a few published articles about individual cases where people had been helped with it using CBT, so we had a look at what they'd been doing, and it was a little bit different from the way we would normally treat anxiety disorders in our service. So we took a little bit from the literature and a little bit from what we were doing already. And so we had one patient we'd had, I think, 2 referrals for it in the space of 5 years or something, and then since I started letting people know that we were working on it, we've had another 15 come through this year. So
great.
It's starting to build, and we've started treating it as a specialty within our service.
Wow. That's brilliant. Good on you, because it does take someone to sort of, say, right, let's get something looked at here, and it's that's really good. That's really plausible.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if everyone who's working on misophonia in some kind of professional capacity either has it themselves or knows somebody with it, because it's hard to imagine anyone else being motivated enough to pick up this wacky condition and start trying to find solutions to it. It sort of requires that personal experience to run with it.
Yeah, that's right. It's it does take one to know one sort of thing. Yeah, definitely. What do you think what is the cause? Is there a cure?
A cure, did you say?
Yeah. What do you think
I don't think there's a cure per se. I think there are some ways of really minimising the emotional distress that it causes, and really minimising the impact that it has on somebody's life. But I think ultimately it's going to come to be looked at as what we call a category of disorders called neurodevelopmental disorders, which includes things like Tourette's syndrome. It includes learning difficulties like dyslexia and dyspraxia. These things where there is just some fundamental difference in the brain and the way it processes information, and that can then have an impact on learning, attention, and emotions and behaviour.
Yeah.
And so that part of it can't actually change. But just like somebody with dyslexia who if when they were growing up they didn't, either dyslexia wasn't known about yet, or they didn't realise they had it, or they didn't have people that were really paying attention to the fact that they were struggling with this, and they might believe that they're stupid or feel really bad about themselves or feel really slow, or maybe people would even tell them that they're stupid or slow, but that person might grow up feeling like that's the truth for them. But if somebody else also had dyslexia and had an experience of being diagnosed really early and being treated like, this is not about you as a person, this is not about your intellectual abilities, this is this particular problem that you have with reading, and here are some accommodations to help you deal with it, and you can live a perfectly normal, functional life and have a good job and all of that, they're going to have a really different experience than the one who didn't know what the problem was. And with misophonia, no one knew what it was, so certainly when I was a kid, there was no explanation for it. So as a kid, I had to come up with my own explanation for it, which was either that people are disgusting and can't have decent manners around me, or they don't care about me and therefore they're doing this intentionally to bother me or upset me, or I'm just this crazy uptight person who is intolerant of other people. And I would kind of switch between those three explanations depending on what was going on in the situation.
Yeah.
So just like someone with dyslexia might feel like they're stupid, I felt like I was crazy. And so it's that aspect of it that we can help with psychology. We can help to shift that feeling of what it feels like is going on in the situation. And most people with misophonia know full well that the reaction is disproportionate to the situation, that even if someone is being a bit gross in the way that they're eating, that the reaction is disproportionate to the level of behaviour. But what it feels like deep down inside is either this person is doing this deliberately to bother me or upset me, or they know I have this problem with sound and they're still doing it, and therefore they mustn't care about me.
Yeah.
And if that's what's being triggered off, then that compounds the emotional reaction. And so what we're trying to do with CBT is help with that side of it, to help tap into a better explanation for what's going on, which includes, I have this sensitivity to sounds and that's okay, and it means I'm going to be distracted by these noises, but it doesn't mean that these people don't care about me, it doesn't mean that they're doing it deliberately to torture me, it doesn't mean that I'm crazy. And actually being able to tap into that explanation at the time they're in that situation helps to bring the emotion level down.
Wow.
And then ideally it gets to the point where they're in situations like that where it might be a distraction or an irritation or a little bit gross, but it's not causing this huge emotional reaction. It's not causing the rage. It's not causing a feeling like you're going to be sick because it's so disgusting, or it's not causing that feeling of panic like you can't escape if you need to. So that's what we're aiming for.
Wow. That's brilliant. That is so, and that is so much more considerate than snap out of it, isn't it?
It just has never helped anyone. That would be like telling somebody with dyslexia just to just read faster. Like that's a ridiculous solution to somebody that has a problem, or somebody who's depressed, just to go out and see friends. Like, the whole problem is that they're having trouble doing that, and that's what they need help with.
Yeah. I think, isn't it, thank God for people like you, Jane. Isn't it good, though, that in this day and age we have... I think we live in a more caring era where there's a lot more... I mean, when I was a nipper in the, 70s and 80s... if you went for counselling, you were a bit loopy. It wasn't understood. It wasn't. But now it's like, every other person is going for or seeking help of some kind, and it's not strange if you're on antidepressants. I think there's a lot more understanding these days. Yeah,
absolutely. It's definitely a more acceptable thing to ask for help.
Yeah.
And also a more acceptable thing to ask for accommodations, that that now, like in school places and in universities, that, well, hopefully the culture's changing where it's okay to help people, help accommodate the environment so that people are in the best position to be able to learn. You know, that's a more acceptable thing to do now as well. Not so much this attitude that they need to work out how to learn in this environment, that we can help modify the environment to help people, school and university and workplaces.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. I think it's good that we've got all this, there's no stigma now attached to mental health conditions, or, you know, conditions, I think, where... Yeah, I remember actually being... I was in comprehensive school in the 80s, and we had a girl that was severely picked on, bless her, and I don't know how she made it through school, to be honest with you, but she had dyslexia, and it wasn't really picked up on. She was just known as a thick kid. She was known as the backward girl, and I was diagnosed at the age of 42 with mild... It doesn't affect my reading or writing, but my thought, I get quite frustrated where, with a dyslexic person, it takes a roundabout way of getting to where they want to go to. But it's good that there's so much more understanding. Now, what's I was reading up on this, misokinesia, is that that's something else, isn't it? Is that the visual version of misophonia?
Yeah. So it's basically the same thing. It's being unable to filter out repetitive movements, and that then sometimes causing the same strong emotional reaction. So the typical examples would be maybe someone twirling their hair, maybe someone's leg shaking, and have people sort of jiggle their leg a little bit.
Cracking their knuckles.
Those repetitive movements have a similar effect as the sounds. Some people also talk about it being visuals that look like they might cause one of the sounds or remind them of one of the sounds, so someone's hand going to their mouth. So it either is a signal that you're about to hear noises that will bother you, or that it reminds your body of that noise, and so you get a similar reaction. So I think there's probably a couple of different kinds of misokinesia. One could be directly related to the feeling that it will create the sound, and the other might be the actual repetition of the visual itself.
Oh, right. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, okay.
But I get really irritated when I see people like stroking each other in public. So someone like stroking their partner's hair or scratching their back or something like that, and the visual of that, I find it really hard to ignore.
Yeah.
And I sort of, it traced back to, I remember there was an ex-boyfriend who turned up at the same event as me and was sitting in front of me with their new girlfriend stroking the back of her neck.
Oh, no.
And so I'd always thought that it was just that I was still pissed off about that. But now I realise that it's actually the same feeling that I get when I can hear a noise that I can't ignore. So,
okay.
Yeah, it's a complicated interpretation, I think.
Yeah. Do you think that's as common as misophonia?
I'm not sure, and I don't think there are any studies so far that ask that question. And certainly clinically, lots of people the people that I've been working with, lots of them have that, a similar reaction to movement, but maybe not always as strong as the sounds. Some people also talk about being really bothered by the feeling of movement or vibration. So if they're sitting somewhere where the floor is a bit wobbly next to them, and every time someone walks past, they can feel the vibrations through the floor coming up through their chair, that would bother them in a similar way. Or their partner moving in bed, if they can feel the mattress moving in bed, then they'll get a similar unsettled kind of feeling, and maybe then escalating into that emotional reaction. I also get it a bit with smells. I think I might be oversensitive to smells, and if I can smell somebody's shampoo or perfume or something like that, I find it a bit overwhelming, and if I keep getting wafts of it, then I start to get distracted by that as well.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, that can be unpleasant. I have certain feels of things. I'm going to be going around there later. My mum and dad, bless them, they're in their 80s, and they've got these cushions on their settee, and as soon as I go in there, I have to just gently fling the cushions over the other side, and they say, "Here she comes, here she is." And I can't describe the it's like that sort of shiny material. And I can't bear the feeling of that. And a lot of people don't like the feeling of velvet. Do you have any...
Is it that kind of squeaky sort of feeling? Like, what's the...
I'm trying to think the sort of
tactile sensation for you on that?
I'm trying to think what polyester is. I don't think that's the word, like the material I'm thinking of. Oh, crumbs. I'm trying to think. Yeah, just kind of a very sort of... almost like what I imagine what divers wear to feel like... What's that? What's it called? I don't... Just like a shiny surface. It's almost like a... It's not a cotton, but it's a shiny sort of... I can't... When I'm not thinking of it, I'll be able to...
And so what's the feeling like? Are you getting sort of a bit of resistance on it, or is it slippery? Like,
I'm with you.
What is it that bothers you?
I don't know. It just... To me, the only way I can describe it is if I've just touched some greasy crisps and I want to wash my hands.
So it actually sort of feels a little bit like dirty almost.
Yeah.
Does it feel a bit like a contamination kind of feeling? Like, I've got to...
It's just I think it's the look that it looks shiny, and it kind of it could almost be a section of Alvis's jumpsuit. It just looks. Well, do you know what, Jane? I can't. If I find a picture of something later on, I'll send it. But it's just a sort of shiny, surfacey, and I just can't bear it. And I just feel I want to wash my hands for a long time afterwards. And it's silly because it's not dirty. It's just the feel. That's all it is.
And that's things like that where it sort of feels. This is where some people have been misdiagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder when they've got misophonia. Is the descriptions like that where it's like, I've just got to get rid of it. And some people talk about like if they feel a really gentle touch, then they have to rub the area sort of to neutralise the feeling.
Okay.
That there's lots of things in misophonia that look a little bit like neutralising, which is one of the key features of obsessive compulsive disorder. And actually there are probably some similarities with misophonia and OCD where that thing of really not being, once something's on your mind, not being able to shake it, not being able to filter it out and just return your attention back to what you were doing before, and needing to do something to compensate for that in some way. So in misophonia, it might be leaving the room or blocking the noise or glaring at the person or asking them to stop. In OCD, it might be washing or tapping or doing something repetitive to counter it, or even just arguing in your own head to try and undo the thought or the feeling in some way. So there are some things that look a bit similar, and I can see why some people might have been misdiagnosed with OCD, and maybe even some people might have both OCD and misophonia, because I think there might be some underlying things that, like the way we filter in and out our sensory experiences, that might predispose someone to both conditions.
Yeah. See, that's interesting. Sometimes I feel a little bit guilty because my mum, she's incredibly hard of hearing. And I think I've seen a few of the posts. I don't know if you've seen them, Jane, in the group that we belong to. Say, I wish I was deaf. And then some other comments sort of come on and say, oh, you wouldn't actually want to be deaf, but we can. That's how it feels, isn't it? Sometimes.
Yeah, and you can understand. Like if people are getting these strong reactions that they just can't control and can't explain, you can sort of see the desperation in that feeling of wanting to not be able to hear anything anymore. There's a paper that a psychiatrist that I work with wrote a paper about an individual case study of a woman who was seeking surgery to make herself deaf because of misophonia.
Wow.
Yeah.
My goodness. And some people have taken their lives, haven't they? Over it.
I've read a couple of articles in just general media saying that that's the case. So you can see what a strong impact it has on some people's lives.
Yeah, that's very sad indeed. It's not an easy thing to deal with. But yeah, it's. Have you shared your struggles with trusted friends, family at all?
I talk about it pretty openly now. I think. Once I wrote a blog post about it, sort of it was out there for everyone to see. But my family knew growing up that I was sensitive to these particular noises, and it was nice to be able to go back as an adult and say, "Oh, look, there's a name for this thing. Does a description of this sound familiar to anyone?" And I think it sort of helped it.
Yeah.
Give them a name for what it was that they had observed me experiencing, and none of us could really understand. And nowadays, so my husband, he's aware of it and extremely understanding about it, and sort of made a few accommodations in the home to make it more peaceful for us. And he'll notice if we're out, he'll notice if my face suddenly screws up. He'll be like, "Oh, do we need to move tables or something like that?" So he's pretty understanding with it, but it also must be just a nightmare, I think, for partners of people with misophonia, because of just the look of disgust on our faces when somebody's chewing like slightly loudly, or even not even necessarily loudly, but the idea that your partner is repulsed by you, it must be a pretty awful feeling for the other person as well. I think you have to talk about it and work out how to manage it as a family because of that. But I certainly talk to people about it now. But occasionally, if I'm in a session seeing a patient who is chewing gum, something, a couple of times, most of the time I can actually filter out and I can be enough present in my job that I just ignore it. But a couple of times I have actually said, I've got this weird sensory thing where it's really hard for me to focus when I can hear chewing, and so would it be okay to spit chewing gum out? And it took me several years to be able to say that to somebody that I was treating as a therapist. And I was really surprised by how accommodating the people that I've asked to do that have been. That they're really understanding and apologetic, which is a surprise, but also a real relief for me that if it was actually affecting my ability to do the job, that people would be accepting of that, and that I could explain it in a way that didn't sound like it was their fault, but actually it's about me and my sensitivity, and I just need a little bit of help to be able to focus properly.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, because there's some, like you say, there's nice ways of putting it where it's not personal for the other person. It's just the way it is. It's good that hubby is understanding about it. That's massive blessing, isn't it? Yeah.
I do feel terrible because we were long distance for a few years when we were first together, and then when we finally moved in together, I'd moved over from Australia, and like within the first day, I just looked at him. I was like, "Did you always breathe this loudly?" And it was just this awful moment. I was like, "Oh God!" That's the first thing I noticed when we started living together is the sound of his breathing, and the part of me was like, "Oh my God, is this what it's going to be like forever?" But we managed to have a laugh about it, and we've found ways to manage it.
Oh, that's good. It's good that he can laugh with it, so it puts you at ease as well, doesn't it? To mention it, and that's good.
Yeah, and I think like for all the suffering that it causes people, like if it wasn't happening to you, it would also seem quite ridiculous. And so if you can step back at it and see it in that way that this is how it looks to other people, that it seems odd or it is funny, then you come from that stance when you're talking to people about it, so that it doesn't sound so much like an attack on the other person and their behaviour, because they don't actually understand or can't actually appreciate the impact that it has on people with misophonia.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I found myself doing a similar thing when I've sort of brought it up. I've done it gently by laughing about things that, you know, do sort of irritate people. Like, I think a lot of people get irritated by, what's an example? Something instead of something, or put ending a word in a K rather than the G that it should be. Everything, you know. And sometimes you can have a laugh about that, where you get the person to sort of identify with it, because there's certain things that, and then you can ease them into, actually it can be a bit more serious than than just having a laugh about it. That can be one of my pet hates is I'm a big fan of Donna Summer, and the number of people that say Donna Summers, I think, don't you say that. There's no S.
So, like, once you've noticed it, then you can't ignore it anymore. You hear it every time. You're always listening for it.
Yeah. Oh, dear.
For me, it's a similarity with when an apostrophe is either missing or in the wrong place. It really slows down my reading, and it makes me feel, again, like I'm really uptight about it, that I think everything should be written correctly, but it's actually just that I find it really jarring when something is out of place when I'm reading.
Yeah.
And so I get a similar reaction, like, why would anyone do that? And of course now with the advent of autocorrect and typing fast on phones and things like that, I've had to learn to accept very regular grammar and punctuation mistakes.
No, I'm with you there. I know. Yeah, I can see that when it's the apostrophe in the wrong place, and different things like the difference between two and two, going to or too fast. I did that the other day, actually. I was texting someone and I used the wrong two, and I was disgusted with myself. What am I doing now?
Because if you have a strong reaction to it, then you just assume that everyone reading it will have just as strong a reaction. It's just like, oh God, they're going to think I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
And actually those people probably don't even notice, or if they do notice, they just don't care. But it's only if it's jarring to you that it bothers you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I don't know if it's something that can maybe get worse as time goes on, because I don't remember having this as a child. Whereas you say you remember it from sort of quite way back. So that's interesting, because I think most people that I've spoken to seem to have memories of it and tend to remember it at a similar age, sort of somewhere between the ages of maybe 8 and 12 seems to be fairly common. Although their parents might be able to think to times further back where they were upset or bothered by certain noises that maybe other kids weren't bothered by. I've got a 5-year-old daughter who came out and said, there's a noise outside my window that's trying to stop me from sleeping. And it was a raindrop that was dripping on a piece of plastic outside, and that's the sort of noise that would also drive me crazy if I was trying to sleep. But I've never spoken about that to her. I've tried my hardest to not talk about my sound sensitivities to the kids at all, because I don't want them to pick up on it. And there she was reporting a very specific one of my triggers that she was experiencing, and that it was stopping her from sleeping. Wow, that's interesting.
And then she said that sometimes she has to come into our bed because her brother's snoring is stopping her from sleeping, and again, that's a really big trigger for me as well. And it's quite a gentle snore, so it's not like it's this loud thing that would keep anyone awake. But if you are tuning into these noises in the way that we do, then it does disrupt sleep. So she's only 5, so I do wonder if
that's interesting.
There might be some signs of it early on, and then it's not until we get a little bit older that we start to actually pay attention to the fact that it's different from other people, and that might be the earliest memories might be when we realise that something's off here, that it's not the same as what other people experience.
Oh yeah, that's true.
But really interesting to hear that you don't remember it developing until much later.
No, I don't, I'm just trying to think, actually. My first, about 10 years ago, I suffered with panic attacks, and that still sort of happens now and then. Well, I think panic is sort of feeding out of fear and not being in control, and what if this happens, what if that happens. But I think, things started to irritate me from then. And then I think it was certain sounds that, what if I can't get away from it? What if I can't cope with it? What if I do something silly in relation to hearing, the sniffer or the rustler or the... But it's, it's trying to... So, yeah, I mean, like you said, maybe it can be due to different things, really.
Yeah, and I think that there could potentially be two kinds of misophonia. One that is more the neurodevelopmental kind that we're just destined to have from childhood, but it could also develop in response to a traumatic experience, or not like it doesn't have to be necessarily a big trauma, but a time where we felt under threat, and if our body associates certain noises with that threat, then we might suddenly be tuning into them more, and if we then wonder why we're tuning into them and get annoyed that we're tuning into them, and then we notice them even more because we're paying attention to it and questioning it, then it might stick. So similar to some people might develop obsessive-compulsive disorder after a period of extreme chaos, that it's a really normal thing to do, to seek soothing rituals and to repetitively think about things a lot when you're in a time of chaos. And so some people do develop symptoms that look like OCD, but is actually just an adaptive function during times of chaos. That maybe misophonia can be an adaptive thing to learn from a threatening experience of what you should listen out for following that experience.
Yeah. You're very insightful, aren't you? What can we expect from a doctor, of course? Very insightful. No,
I'm insightful in this very, very specific area, which I think I do.
Oh, no.
But I think about it a lot, and I think it's really, really important as part of my job to make people feel like that there's not something fundamentally wrong or broken in them, that actually every bad habit we've developed for a really good reason, and usually those habits were incredibly helpful and protective at the time, and in retrospect they may not have been the most adaptive things, but that it was what we needed at the time to get through, and it's just that we then got stuck there, and either the circumstances have changed and we no longer need them, or the consequences have changed and now it's having too big of an impact on our lives.
Yeah, oh, right, yeah.
Actually thinking about all of these problems that we treat in psychology as developing for a reason and then just getting stuck, and therefore we need to help people get unstuck and readjust, but there's nothing wrong with them for developing it, having developed it in the first place. And the ones that have a more neurological element to the ones that are start in childhood, so things like OCD and schizophrenia that are actually probably more along the lines of neurodevelopmental disorders, that even that there may have been at some point some kind of function to these ways of processing the world.
Yeah. Wow, it's fascinating stuff. It is fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, Jane, it's been great to chat with you about this important matter. I can't believe this hour has gone so quickly.
Oh my goodness, that has gone quickly.
It has. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and wish you all the very best with raising the awareness. It's such a wonderful thing to do, so important. And to the listeners, thank you for tuning in.
It's really exciting and stimulating change in my career to focus my attention on this and to actually try and find solutions that could potentially help a huge amount of people.
That is wonderful. That is really good. No, it takes someone who's, as you said, takes someone who's going through it to actually educate about the area. Yeah, to the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you think you may be suffering from misophonia, there are helpful organisations of support which will be featured on the homepage. So don't suffer in silence. Perhaps that wasn't the right thing to say. Actually, if you have misophonia, you won't suffer in silence, that's for sure. So until next time, lots of love and God bless.